Hello, everybody. Yay! It's my Facebook Live. I always look so forward to having this Facebook Live. Number one, I get to see all of you. Well, not really see you, but I get to see your pictures when you put up your questions. So I get very excited about that. And I get excited because I get to educate you all. Although it seems like our society is much more educated about these things than they used to be, right? I mean, it seems like the questions that you're asking me, you already kind of know things. So that's a bonus. That's a bonus for me and a bonus for you as well, because our society is much more educated these days. Anyway, welcome to the Facebook Live. As you know, attorney Laura Sterling, here I am. And we know the topic that we're talking about this month, right? Because I've kind of been doing short videos all through to kind of give you some information, quick little tidbits like I usually do. Also, I want to give you a little heads up. I don't know if you saw it on Facebook, but not only am I on Facebook now, I am on YouTube. Yes, I'm a YouTuber now. Although I think the other YouTubers are much younger than me and they know more what to do. I'm an old YouTuber, so I'm just going to be talking. I'm not going to be doing all that fancy stuff that they do on YouTube. But please, also check into my YouTube channel. Subscribe to it, and apparently there's some kind of bell you got to ting or something so that you can get an alert when I post a new video. So make sure you get that bell. I'm not quite sure if it's like like a Rocky Balboa bell. Remember that? I love that movie, by the way. Ting, ting. And then you're alerted when I'm on YouTube. So make sure that you do that and you watch me on YouTube as well, so that you have multiple streams to watch me on. Not quite on TikTok yet. I can't. Whew, that's a little fast for me. So that might take a while for me to get used to doing that. But anyway, like I was saying, our topic this month is financial issues in a divorce. We all know what that is, right? Money. Money is a hot topic. Property is a hot topic. I have so many divorces that I could tell you about where the home is a hot topic. Alimony is a hot topic. All of that it's a personal issue, right? Our home is our personal space, right? That we want to keep our home. We want to stay, but wait a minute. This is my bedroom and this is my bathroom and this is my kitchen. And so a lot of times, that becomes an issue, and it's a personal issue that we want to stay. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about all of those financial issues. And I'm so excited that I have a guest today. I'm just beyond excited. I know it's hard for you to tell when I'm excited, when I'm not excited, because I'm pretty much excited all the time. But I'm really excited about the guests that we have. And I know if you've followed me on Facebook, you've been able to see who my guest is. I mean, she helps women mostly with divorces and their financial issues, because unfortunately, in a divorce, women tend to be down here and men tend to be up here, right? Because as a woman, we tended to stay home and take care of the children and do all those kind of things while our husband was out earning the money. And so it's kind of not even. So she has some strategies to talk about. And I'm so excited too, because as you know, I'm a Midwestern gal. I'm from northern Minnesota. Yes, cold. If you've been watching me on Facebook, you've seen my pictures of the coldness up there. Well, she's from Wisconsin. So me and her are like on the same wavelength, right? Except probably when it comes to football. Football, we're probably not going to see eye to eye. But, we're Midwestern, so we can get along. Last night, I was watching the movie Fargo with my husband. He had never seen it before. I was like, how can you not see Fargo? I'm like, the snow, the accent, it's all put together so nicely to just kind of emanate us from the Midwest. Anyway, okay, y'all sit back, relax. Hopefully, you have your water or your soda, you have your chips, your popcorn. Hopefully, you have a pad of paper and a pen so you can write down notes. And we're going to go forward with I wanted to tell you too, newscaster Laura, she's on vacation. I think she's somewhere in the Caribbean enjoying herself. So she's not going to be on Facebook today. She's taking a break. So it's just going to be me and my special guest. So I want to introduce my special guest, but first I want to bring her in. So team, why don't we bring her in? Yay! There's Rhonda, everybody. Let me introduce you first, Rhonda. This is Rhonda Noordyk. She is a certified divorce financial analyst. And I don't know what that is. Why don't you explain to the team and to everybody watching what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to be on today. I absolutely love sharing and talking and being able to get to know the people that are part of your Facebook Lives. So a certified divorce financial analyst is somebody who is specially trained to work with people around the money, financial issues going through divorce. And I would say, I was in the financial industry prior to me starting my company in 2014. And so I'd use my CDFA a little bit different maybe than most people do. But the main role, my main job is to empower people, particularly women, going through divorce, helping them have a strategy, helping them navigate through evaluating their options, looking at consequences, managing risk, and ultimately helping them navigate through and have a better outcome. And I'll leave you with this before we kind of move into the next phase, but I went back and did some preliminary work on, hey, what's the impact? I know I'm helping clients, but what's the impact been over the last 8 years as I've been in the trenches with women that are going through divorce, not just in Wisconsin, but all over the country? $20 million. $20 million are now in the hands of women.
Oh, wow.
That otherwise would have been left on the table.
Oh,
and I think it's just been absolutely so rewarding to be able to have that level of impact.
Wow, that's fabulous. I mean, because like I was talking before, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, the woman in a divorce has a tendency to decrease their income compared to the man or the husband in the divorce, correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, Laura, the stats that we have seen historically has been that women's lifestyle tends to go down 41% after the divorce is over.
Wow.
And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Having been out of the workforce, the pay gap that does, exist and things like that. The spouse typically is further down in the career chain or the career ladder or the career trajectory where they just have been in the workforce longer and have had those opportunities to advance. So yeah, it's a big problem.
Wow. And then I'm going to ask this because I'm sure that I have men watching. Have you ever helped men? Have they ever been kind of on the bottom and the woman's been on the top as far as financials?
Absolutely. Yeah, you know what? And I'm so glad that you asked that question because I have worked with a small handful of men, right? Mainly 99% of my practice is women. But what I've seen when the roles are reversed is this, and this was fascinating to me. And that is when I have women that are the higher income earner. Typically, what ends up happening is, first of all, we have to work that much harder, right, to still get that playing field, right? And women, a lot of it's within our own mind, not feeling guilty or shame that we essentially overcompensate and give more than what would even be required. And so I found that fascinating because I thought for sure if we had the higher income earners, right, that it would not be the case. But it's posed its own set of challenges. And I work with people that are in both of those camps, right? I work with the high income earner women. I work with the women that have maybe been stay-at-home parents or are re-entering the workforce or whatever. But each of those camps kind of has their own set of challenges.
Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure because if the woman's making more income and you're helping the man, then right, the as women we have a tendency to want to take care. Do you find that kind of want to nurture? So we feel bad. Okay, I'll give all of this up. Do you find that?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I know we've been talking about some stats and some trends that you're seeing in divorces. What are you seeing now? I mean, especially with I guess I shouldn't say it. Should I say it? We're going into a recession, maybe. And I saw this morning that housing prices are going down, but the interest rate is going up. Do we see problems with that going forward? Are you seeing some trends?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's exactly what we're seeing. It's interesting because I think there's a couple of issues that have been posed with that. One is very early on in my process and working with clients, we put together a budget. I know, not sexy, not glamorous, but so important, right? Because it lays the foundation for all of the future conversations around, can I buy? Can I rent? Should I sell my house? All of that, right? So, but now that we are seeing some of these trends where, yeah, housing prices are going down a little bit. We are also going into winter. So, I mean, some areas like, the Midwest, right, may have a greater impact on that than others. But interest rates have significantly increased since the time that maybe a lot of the folks have taken out their mortgage. And what that means is dollars and cents, it's going to cost them more money each month to stay in their current home or purchase a new home. So people have often said, "Hey, Rhonda, can we both stay on the mortgage?" Or, can whatever, right? Can't I just take my spouse off of there? And it's not quite that simple.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I do for my clients is I'm helping kind of manage the process and the people and the positioning is I say, let's pull in a mortgage broker. Let's crunch the numbers.
Smart.
Look at what that will look like. Typically you can't both really stay on the mortgage for longer than maybe a year. I mean, again, each situation's a little bit different, and we can certainly give one party a little bit of time, right? A little buffer to kind of get situated and whatever. But I went down that path because I'm like, okay, what's the worst case scenario if we did that? And, at the end of the day, the biggest risk factor for people is if they wanted to purchase another home, but they were already on a mortgage, it's going to impact if they're going to qualify at all or the amount that they could purchase for their home. And the second part of it is if the person who is responsible for the mortgage doesn't pay, guess what? Your credit score, your, overall financial status could be impacted by that. So, is it absolutely the end of the world to stay on it for a short period of time? No. But I do try to encourage people to explore some options. We've also started to see, Laura, more people exploring the co-borrower option, where again, they would maybe have a family member or a friend that would basically come alongside and be the co-borrower so that they could refinance the property. So we've had to start to get creative and look at some of those things. If we would have looked back, gosh, even over the last couple of years, right? Housing market was crazy. We know that. But then how we saw that for the impact on the divorce side was, I mean, people would put their house on the market. It would sell so quickly. They'd have to try to figure.
Yes.
So not one person was kind of stuck with it, or whatever. Interest rates were low. So nobody really hesitated to think twice about refinancing. But my approach with that stuff is let's look at the options. I've got a process I take people through as we're making decisions. What are the, what's the issue? What are the pros and cons of those issues? What are some, things we need? What additional information we need to help empower the client to make a good decision? And then what's the decision? And I have found, taking women in particular through that process, a lot of times they will come to their own conclusion rather than me saying, you can't keep the house or you should keep the house. I always say, I'm not going to tell you that. Let's dive in. Let's get the information. Let's make sure you have all of the information, make a good decision. I can be a sounding board for you, right? But ultimately they have to make, that decision.
Well, and that's good because in fact, I had a case today where the husband is on the mortgage and the wife wants to keep the house. And he's like, well, what's going to happen? I mean, I got to keep my name on the mortgage. I'm like, no. And exactly right. Those were the issues that I said, the two issues that I said. Hey, if she stops paying on the mortgage, then guess what? The mortgage company doesn't care if you have a court order that says she's responsible to pay that mortgage because you signed that contract. You're responsible.
That's right.
So she needs to get a mortgage or refinance or do whatever she needs to do. But I do like that co-borrower that I've never heard of. And I think that that's a good idea to kind of throw out there for them to investigate with the bank and with family if they're willing to do it, of course. I want to take a moment, Rhonda. We do have a question. Maybe if you could pop up a question for us Camille. Oh, hello, Mr. Borland. I'm not even going to say your first name because I know I will just butcher it. Oh, you're welcome. We love doing this show, so we're glad that you've joined us. Can my ex withhold visitation if we're having issues about the support payments? Well, let me answer that quickly because it is a financial issue. It's a legal question. If you're in Florida, the two don't coincide, meaning if you don't pay support, you can't see the children, or, you can't see the children if you don't pay, they don't coincide. They're not one and the same. They're two separate issues. You can see your children and you need to pay child support. She needs to let you see the children, even if you're not paying child support, but hopefully you can pay child support. I don't know what the issue is, but no, you can't withhold either. And the children are not commodities. The children are, they need dad and they need mom in their life. So whether you pay support or not does not gear whether or not you can see the children. So if you have a court order that says you can see the children, you have a parenting plan here in Florida, you can always take her to court and say, hey, she's not letting me see my children. But she may turn around and say, well, he's not paying child support. So you may get two motions at the same time, and you both could, where the court's going to say you need to pay support and they're going to tell her you need to let them see the kids. So hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Borland. Sorry you're not, she's doing that to you. And hopefully you find a way to be able to pay support. So anyway, okay. So it seems to be a big issue. A lot of, the child support and alimony and stuff like that. That seems to be a big issue. What kind of advice do you give to women and some men about that are going through the divorce if they're going to contemplate it and the financial issues they're facing, like Mr. Borland, child support, alimony, financial, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always of the mindset of let's get all of the information. And the caveat to that is, the support calculations are only as good as the numbers that we put into the calculator.
Yes.
I decided early on that I actually do not run the child support calculations. I do rely on the attorneys to do that in their respective states. But I can review those and say, hey, could we run this scenario or that scenario? Or I can do a deeper dive on support analysis once we have those original, state specific calculations. And that's been really helpful because really what I'm looking for there is one party's need and one party's ability to pay.
Right.
And I have some specific processes that I take people through that just really helps clients show up being prepared to have those conversations. The tricky part there is what are we using for income? And each state's a little bit different. Sometimes we're using tax statements or W-2, income on a summary for the year. Sometimes we're using recent tax returns. Sometimes we'll look at Social Security historical information. And sometimes we're using imputed income where they're saying, we believe that this person could be making more than what they're currently making. So there's all of these factors that go into it. And I don't know about from your experience, Laura, but from mine, it's never as black and white as people think that it's going to be.
I agree, because in an alimony situation here in Florida with alimony, it's first of all need and ability to pay, like you said. What is the person that needs the money? What is their need? We got to show that. And then what's the ability of the other person to pay? And then we look at years of marriage in Florida, which also can gear what kind of alimony that you get and for how long. And then we look at all kinds of different factors, the duration of the marriage, the physical capabilities of the parties. What was their married life like? Did they live this glamorous, going on vacations and having a ski villa and all this? And now the person's saying, oh, I don't have any money. So they look at those different factors. And you're right. It's not, with alimony, it's not black and white. Child support, they put it in the calculation, it's calculated out, pops a number. But with alimony, what I always tell my people that are asking for alimony, hey, you need to sit down and go through what are your basic bills and what do you need to survive based on if your employment is well, if you're able to be employed. I've had people that have been unable to be employed. And so maybe based on their Social Security as well, but giving me those numbers so that when I go to court, I can say, this is what they need based on X, Y, and Z, not just going, I want $5,000. And then the court looks at me like, and Yeah, I need to show
Yeah.
that. So I explain to my clients and I have them break it out. We have another question. Let's pop up so we can see what's going on with our people. Oh, Marissa. Oh, I can tell you were in Florida when this picture was taken because I see Disney in the background. How long does the alimony payment last? Well, again, here in Florida, what it is there's bridge the gap alimony. Bridge the gap is a short term, just trying to get you through the divorce and maybe a little bit beyond. We have durational. Durational is the duration of the marriage. If you were married for 4 years, it's 4 years. If you're married for 10 years, 10 years. So, but it can't go any further than the amount of years that you were married. We have rehabilitative alimony. Rehabilitative alimony means here's my I need to get back into the workforce, and I'm sure you've seen this before, Rhonda, where the woman has stayed home taking care of the children. Now she's gone through a divorce. She needs to get back into, maybe I had one that she was a medical assistant. She had been out of it for 4 years taking care of children. Now she had to go back. She's like, 4 years is a long time to be away from a profession. So she needed some rehab alimony to kind of get her trained and get her back and get her moving again. And so then you just have to show the court how long you need to do that.
Yeah.
And then there's the final, the permanent periodic alimony. That is, well, until one party dies or the person receiving it remarries, or in the state of Florida has a supportive relationship, meaning they're living with somebody in a relationship, in an intimate relationship, not a roommate, but an intimate relationship. You know, the person paying shouldn't have to pay for this relationship. So as long as you can prove that,
Yeah.
hey, they're supportive, they're supporting each other, then you can stop it. Otherwise, it just goes on. I had somebody, he owned an insurance company. They had been married 30 years and he paid her alimony. And then he came to retire and he asked for a modification saying, hey, my income's going to drop. And the court allows that. They allow modifications. So, but anyway, so that's how long. It just depends on which alimony you're looking for. So, Rhonda, how can women prepare themselves for this divorce? They know it's coming or they've been talking about it. Maybe nobody's filed anything yet, but they've been talking and they're trying to work everything out. And what I see is maybe one party, let's say it's the husband, is telling the wife, oh, I don't have anything, I'm going to give you $10,000 and you'll be fine. And then they come to me and say, well, he's offering me 10,000. I'm like, well, what does he have? Well, I don't know. What would you advise somebody to do in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many pieces to this that I could unpack. But I think the first thing is, if you're hearing, hey, you're going to be fine, I'm going to take care of you, it's like, okay, well, let's define what fine means, because one party's definition of fine may be very different than the other party's definition of fine. So I always say there's a couple things that people can do if they're in that, what I would call like contemplation stage. They maybe haven't officially decided they're going to move forward with a divorce, or they're pretty sure they are, but they still feel like they need to get some stuff in order. And so there's a couple things. First of all, I would say make sure that you are engaging, exploring, the emotional, mental health kind of component. Certainly a huge part of this process, right? Mm-hmm. The other piece of it is some practical things. I'm all about practical, strategic, because I think at the end of the day, we can run a gazillion numbers and have, tons of reports. But if people, right, don't know what that means for them, exactly, it's kind of like noise, right? Mm-hmm. So a couple things that I will suggest. One, is making sure that you are watching the mail. Just monitor, just be aware. If you see something comes in that looks like it might be financial, jot it down, take a picture of it. The other thing is consider setting up a separate email. This will allow you to have private, conversations as you're kind of exploring, right? Mm-hmm. For my clients, I will also help them with the interview process, finding the right, amazing attorneys throughout the country. Being part of that like selection process, I think is important. Doesn't hurt to have a consultation, to get information. I have a podcast called Divorce Conversations for Women. We've been around for about 5 years. So people find a lot of really great nuggets of information on there as well. And I think the other piece of it too is just be your own private investigator. I mean, people, when they actually are focused on finding certain aspects of looking for things, like I had a client one day call and she said, Rhonda, my husband's out of town. I don't really know anything about the finances. I found a binder. What should I do? And I'm
Oh,
like,
nice. That's
thank you.
very nice. I wish my clients would find a binder.
I mean, it was awesome. And you know what? He wasn't necessarily even trying to be shady or anything like that.
It's
But it just,
organized.
yes. And it allowed her, right, to get a handle on what there might be. And I always say, we don't have to be the experts. You just have to be the gatherer at this point. We can help you as you're going through the process, right? The attorneys, the financial folks can help you make sense of the pieces. Just gather. I had another client who calls me and she goes, Rhonda, guess what? I said, what? She goes, I found in the recycling bin all kinds of statements. And I was like, oh,
Wow.
well, sometimes people don't always cover their tracks as much as maybe they think that they do. So those are just some practical ways. The other thing is, if you are concerned that somebody is intercepting the mail between the time that it arrives in your mailbox and it arrives on the kitchen counter or the table where all of mine are, you can sign up through the USPS for a free service that they will actually take a picture of all of the mail for that day and send you an email, right? So that way, then you can just kind of keep, so there's nothing major that needs to get done, except for the fact that I love for people to be in that kind of gathering stage. I think it's really kind of the best thing that you can be doing as you're moving in that direction.
I must say about the whole taking the picture and sending an email, and sorry, Dad, if you're watching, I got to call him out. My dad signed up for that service. I didn't even know there was such a thing. So he's like, hey, coming in the mail today is such and such and such. Really? Has the mail come? He's like, no, I got an email. Oh, wow. I didn't even know you could do that. So yeah, you can do that. So you know what's coming in the mail and you can see what's coming. And I do tell my clients, there's been times where I have their husband's financials because they're required to provide full and fair disclosure, financial disclosure in a divorce. And I'll get the paycheck stub and I'll go, oh, look, your husband has a 401k, has an IRA. Oh, I didn't even know that. And I'm like, yes, and I'll show them on the paycheck stub, because some people they'll hand their paycheck stub over and they don't realize, oh, look, it has a lot of information on it.
And they're max funding it. So it looks like they're bringing home less.
Right. And two, it'll say year to date. And so what they've put in it for year to date. So I like to educate my clients as well to say, hey, look, this is what's going on. Did you know about any of this? And a lot of times they don't.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good to be educated. Do we have another question to pop up there? Let's see what our next question is. So, oh, hi, Gracia. Okay, thank you. My husband offered me the house after the divorce, but I don't know if I can afford to keep it. That's another issue. The mortgage isn't fully paid off yet. It is more convenient to tell him to sell it and split the profits. Well, that's really up to you what you want to do. But that's another thing. Do you find that a lot of times, Rhonda, that the person, I have a lot of times the wife who wants to keep the house because she wants to keep the kids kind of stable, but then she's got to pay the electric, the homeowner, she's got to pay everything on the house. And if they can't afford it, you don't want to make your client house poor. I mean, have you seen that where they really want to keep the house, but you're having to make them realize that financially it may not be the best thing?
Yeah, it's certainly gotten tricky because right now, the way that the housing market has been, oftentimes people, if we looked at, hey, do I rent or do I buy or do I refinance or whatever, they're not that far off. I mean, there were years when you're like, oh my gosh, definitely, like you should be renting, It's not quite that obvious. And so I would say kind of where we started the conversation, which is I would start with looking at the budget, trying to get an idea of what that looks like, and then meeting with a mortgage professional who can crunch some of those numbers and see where it lands. I will say that because of the way that the housing market has been, we've seen again over the last couple of years where something I had never experienced before, which was houses were selling so quickly that you didn't have to worry about holding it for a year or 18 months till it sold. It was like, hey, the market's hot. We know that there is not as much of an inventory right now. Gosh, sell it, take the money, and start over, So I feel like there is that piece of it that certainly is an important part for people to consider. And the longer that you hold it and the longer that the interest rates continue to go up, you may have,
You're going to
I
have a
mean,
lot.
we don't have a crystal ball, but we do know that, we're definitely in some unique times. So,
Right. And is it worth selling right now, or is it worth kind of holding on to it until the market maybe does an upswing? We don't know when that'll be. We don't know what's going on, but yeah, I just saw that this morning on the Today Show, how the prices are going down, which is great, but then the interest rate, and you're ending up paying more. So it's really just keeping abreast, I find, and I'm sure you do, Rhonda, as well, the news and what's going on with the economy to kind of direct our clients as to what they should do and what they shouldn't do.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
but what are some red flags that you see when it comes to financial discovery, like financial disclosure, and what kind of makes you? I know what makes the hair pop up in the back of my neck. I just want to see what you think.
Yeah, so there's a couple things, and I get all fired up about this stuff because it's what the public thinks really happens, and then what you and I see day to day as we're rolling up our sleeves and we're like, okay. So a couple things. The biggest thing for me is a lack of financial transparency. Probably the one where, and I came up with an acronym. I don't really swear, so it's DAM. But but it's dodging the disclosure statement. It's like, each state, you usually have a period of time where you're supposed to disclose both parties,
Yep.
they dodge it. Hey, we're still waiting on that. We're still waiting on that. And so the party who, a lot of times my clients will have that stuff done as much as we can, sometimes even before they file. It's awesome. But they dodge the disclosure statement. So that's the D. The A is avoiding getting assets valued by a third party. So what do I mean by that? Well, we want to have actual like fair market values on homes. We don't want to pull Zillow or anything like that. We want to have an actual, sometimes we'll need appraisals on homes, right? Sometimes I just had a case, they had 20 classic cars. Husband says they're not worth anything.
Oh.
I said, oh, great. Because we have a classic car expert within my network that we pulled $500,000 later on only the vehicles.
Wow.
So, so had we taken his value of not worth much, versus doing our due diligence and saying, listen, we have a third party that we're going to actually have these valued. That includes pensions, that includes businesses, that includes, a lot of the things that as we go through this process, people might say, oh, well, I don't think it's worth very much. Okay, well, maybe that's true, right? But let's look at the risk and reward opportunity. My client probably spent, maybe 5%, right, to have those cars valued on what she got in exchange. So, that's a big thing. Or the other part of it is related to income. Oh, my income's going to be going down. Oh, I'm going to be, losing my job. Oh, I'm not going to get a raise. Oh, I'm not going to get a bonus. And I always say, okay, well, we can deal with that when it happens. We're going off of the data that we have, which is the year-to-date pay stub and the information, the W-2s and tax returns from last year. So that's another thing. And then the M is missing supporting documentation. And I'll never remember this. This was early on when I started my company 8 years ago. I had gone to an attorney meeting with one of my clients, which sometimes I'll do virtually, sometimes I'll do in person. And she showed up with a legal pad, yellow legal pad, and all this stuff written on it. And I was like, okay. So we're sitting there and she's like, oh, we have this, and this is the amount, and, whatever. And the attorney said, well, we need follow-up documentation. And she said, well, I trust the numbers that, he gave me these numbers and I trust the information. I was like, well, I'm not saying he's lying, right? Because we don't know that, but we need the backup documentation. So that's sometimes where it gets lost, it gets messy. People, fax us one page of like, it's just, they try to create chaos, right? To hopefully kind of like deflect what's really going on. So the dodging financial disclosure statements, avoiding getting those assets valued, and then missing supporting documentation are probably the biggest ones I see.
I think I'm going to implement that. I like that, an acronym. You're exactly right. I feel like my job, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Rhonda, you love giving that power to that person, because a lot of times they come in, well, they told me this, and they feel so weak. And then I want to give them that power. I was actually representing the father in a case. It was a paternity, but they were never married, but they have a child. And he was doing it all by himself the whole time. And they were both doing it. Both mom and dad were doing it all by themselves. And then he hired me, and I just gave him the power and gave him the energy to go, no, this is how it's supposed to be done. And it was funny because then she hired an attorney, and her attorney said, well, she said everything was going fine until he hired you. I don't know. Everything was going her way until he hired me. So I like to give that power. I like to see my clients come in, and now they've got, their shoulders back, and they feel more empowered, and they feel more
Totally.
powerful. So I like that. I know we have another question. We have many questions. So why don't we put another question up? Oh, hi, Agus. How are you? Can I legally get my ex-husband to take out life insurance to keep alimony if something happens to him? I know with me, I always in my pleadings, if there's going to be any alimony or even child support, although child support, if something happens to either party, any children under the age of 18 will get a Social Security benefit. But with alimony, you don't get that. As an ex-wife, you don't get anything. And so I'll always ask for them to take out a life insurance policy to secure that alimony payment should something happen to the payer, because otherwise they pass away and you've got, let's say, permanent alimony, and now you've got nothing. You've got nothing. And now you're really in a hole because you depended on that money for your income and for your living, and you put it into your budget like Rhonda had you do. So that's a very good question. Like I said at the beginning, Rhonda, it seems like people are more knowledgeable about things.
Yeah.
Not back in the day, like maybe in my parents' age or even before that, they just got a divorce and whatever they got, and that was fine. But people seem to be more equipped. Do you find that?
I think it kind of depends. I think there's a lot of information, particularly online, right? So people are gathering more information. I think the tricky part is deciphering what's accurate and what's not.
Correct.
So having, so certainly I always welcome, the questions that people have. But I do think I'm like, it's not exactly, how that works. But I love, love, love the life insurance conversation around this, because I do think my job when I'm working with clients on the financial end is to review the final, documents before they're signed, right? Or the draft final, just to make sure that we have all those buttons, everything's buttoned up. And the life insurance piece is one that a lot of times is overlooked by, attorneys. And if it goes to trial, do we think that they're actually going to I don't know, but I mean, we definitely can put them into those agreements as much as possible and advocate for that so that the attorneys will add them. I will help just do a basic calculation to just make sure that we have, the duration of the time period needed as well as the amount. There was a case recently that one of my colleagues was sharing with me that he's still in the financial industry, and he and I used to work together. And basically he came to the table and he's like, Rhonda, you're never going to believe what happened. Long story short, there was the gentleman who was paying support. He was supposed to be paying alimony for 10 years. At the 9.5-year mark, he decided he was going to do some updates to his estate plan. And he changed the beneficiary on his life insurance to his new wife, right? And removed the,
former
first wife, right? And the problem with that was he ended up drowning in while he was doing a triathlon prior to the 10-year mark. So that case went to, basically they ended up saying, hey, listen, you got to give wife number one, the dollar amount that was indicated in the marital settlement agreement. And wife number two is, not happy about it or whatever. But I'm like, you know what? I was grateful that they held him accountable because he didn't cross the finish line. And we just don't know, right? Now, they could have probably prorated, minus whatever had been paid. The difference that was due would be paid out or whatever. I wasn't part of that case, but I was like, yes, that was the moment of, I felt like justice when that original marital settlement agreement stood up against the test. And it's a big deal, and so you could say, well, she got more than what she should have.
Doesn't matter. Wow. Yeah. You don't think he probably thought, 6 months, I'll be fine.
That's right. I'm just trying to get my stuff in order.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily that it was from an ill place.
Right. He just thought,
you knew the parameters, so, so that stuff really can have an impact because we just don't know. And if she didn't have that, right, and he would have passed away sooner, she would have been left like, okay,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So it's an important piece to have in place.
Yeah, I think that life insurance, I think it is too. And I think it's overlooked a lot. I agree
It
with
is.
you. You know, when I do my petitions, I throw everything in there. I tell my clients, I throw everything because guess what? If you don't ask for it, you can't get it. But if you ask for it, you can always give it up. But I
Yeah.
throw life and I throw everything in there.
Yep.
So I think that's a very good question. Do we have another? I think we have another question that we can put up. Oh boy, Mr. Moscoso. I'm going to pronounce it. I'm sure I'm butchering it. I'm so sorry. How much child support will I have to pay? That is, I get that question all the time. It depends on your state. Here in Florida, we have a mathematical equation that we do. Your income, what are your deductions as far as federal? We don't have state income tax here in Florida. Yay. But you know, your federal, your Medicare, maybe if you have health insurance, all of those kind of things. And then we get your net pay. Then we look at, you know, we take both parties' net pay. Then we look at how many overnights you have with the children. Here in Florida, the more overnights you have, the less child support you're going to pay. So then we look at, okay, is somebody paying for health insurance for the children? They get a benefit for that on their side. Is somebody paying daycare for the children? They get a benefit of that on their side. And then it's just out pops a number. And I've had many cases where, you know, I've been representing the woman, the one that's going to be receiving the child support, and the father's been, I'll never forget, he was sitting on the other side of the table. It was in front of a magistrate. So we were just at a table. And I showed the numbers, and the magistrate said, okay, you're ordered to pay whatever amount it is in child support. And he looked at the magistrate and said, I have a friend who has a kid and he doesn't pay that much. And the magistrate was like, well, I really can't comment on that because every case is different. There's no set, like, you know, Mr. Moscoso, you have one child, you make this amount of money, this is what you're going to pay. At least not in Florida. I don't know what it is in other states. And if you're not in Florida, you may want to check with your state to see what the law is in regards to child support. But it really just depends on, you know, what your income is. And it's just a whole math. We have a whole program that does it. So
Yeah, and some states are, you know, more complicated than others in their calculations. One of the things that I will sometimes encourage people to do is either A, right, you can consult with an attorney and have them run those calculations for you based on just some general information. Again, it's a preliminary number, but it does kind of help people at least have a ballpark as they're trying to plan their lives.
exactly.
The other thing is a lot of the states will have child support calculators on the website. So people can go to it and just kind of play around with, you know, some of those things. But usually as the case goes on, as you know, we get more clarity around exactly what that's going to look like. But
right.
yeah, that's a big question for sure.
I know, and it's tough because I know you're trying to, okay, I'm trying to plan, and we can't really. And if you do come, and you're right, Rhonda, if you give us sketchy numbers, maybe we can run something that'll give you a little sketchy. But I always tell my people, don't hang your hat on this.
Yeah.
You know, it may not be what it is. It may be more, it may be less. It depends on how many overnights you get, all of that kind of stuff. So that's how we do it down here in the state of Florida. I've always been intrigued about how they do it in different states. Do they do it differently or whatever? But, you know, I got too much in my head right now doing that. Just make my head explode. I don't want to do that. I guess we have another question. Maybe Camille, if you could put that up. Oh, Florencia. Oh, look at your puppy. So cute. What happens if I do not provide all my financial documents in my divorce case? Let me tell you, I had a case just this morning I was in court for. Virtual, luckily. I'm so happy we do virtual these days. But my client did not provide all the financials, just was not providing. The other side was like, hey, what's going on? We need to calculate child support appropriately. We need to see what the value of the home is, what to do with the home. We need financials. My client just wasn't giving them. And so he filed what we can do here in Florida, motion to compel. And the motion to compel is saying, hey, judge, they're required under the mandatory financial disclosures, which here in Florida is Florida Family Law Rule 12.285, where it gives a list of items we're supposed to provide. They're supposed to provide it, and they're not. And so, my client is having to spend extra attorney fees and time in trying to get this. So we had the hearing, and we had filed it. Of course, she gave it to last minute, so we got it all in, but it still is short. And so the judge was granting the motion to compel. And with that, they were awarding some attorney fees. My client had to pay some attorney fees because
Right.
she wasn't getting it, and he had to expend time and energy to try to get these. They're mandatory. Now,
Yeah.
you can always waive them, like, hey, neither side wants to give financials. I don't advise my clients to do that. I've had them just insist in the past, but that's your choice.
Right.
But I always encourage, hey, financials, we need to get a full and fair disclosure, because, okay, if you agree to waive these financials and then you find out later on they had this what, they won the lotto and they put it in a special account to hide from you, and you missed out. What's the lotto now? I think it's like 600 and some million or something. And you missed out on it because you just waived it. It's hard to go back and capture that. I don't know if you've seen that, Rhonda, the issue.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, it's tough because there isn't necessarily as much accountability in this area as I wish that there was. I'll say that.
Mhm.
However, there is a process for discovery, and ultimately it's aid, right? Ask. So you ask for it, you hope that you get the information you need. If people, don't necessarily comply, they can do interrogatories, right? Which they ask a series of questions specifically around the financials, and then they can do, depositions, right? They can pull somebody in and drill them, with a court reporter in the room and say, hey, what happened to this document, or what happened to this account, or whatever. There are also some other, resources that people can use, whether it's hiring a private investigator to do an asset search, which sometimes we'll do, or, hiring a forensic accountant to help kind of provide some, a pathway around maybe, assets or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, I find that most of the people that I work with are pretty open to sharing. And I know for me, like if people are like, I'm not going to share all my stuff, I'm like, I actually don't take them on as clients, because I really like to operate from a position of, being above board on all the things. So, yeah, I think it's, again, if there's inheritance or, things like that, I mean, certainly those things really do need to be disclosed.
Well, and two, it was funny because this morning it was kind of a cattle call. So I got to hear the hearings before mine as well. And one attorney was talking about, she represented the wife and the husband was not providing financials. She said, we actually hired an asset company to search. And she says, and I have a huge list of items that we have not been provided. And so I said, oh, that's a good idea. Obviously, though, like you talked about a forensic accountant, asset searching, private, those cost money. And so if you're willing to pay to have, if you feel that, hey, there's a lot of assets out there and I'm willing to pay, you said the guy who with the cars, oh, they're not worth much. And she paid probably some money to get them appraised. But in comparison to what she got from it, sometimes we forget to look at the forest for the trees, like the little bit. Let's say we pay $500 to get them all appraised, and she gets $250,000 from it. Hey, I'd pay that. So,
Yeah.
Just being able to get in and get somebody to get dirty, because I can't do that. I can't do that. I can send out subpoenas if I know where stuff is. If I don't know where stuff is, if I haven't been given that information. And I think, Rhonda, that's important what you said about the mail and getting and looking, and that way you can give me information. So I can maybe, I found this Bank of America statement. Let's send a subpoena to Bank of America to see what he has, or see what she has to get that information. And even the woman, when she was talking about the attorney that was talking about the asset search, she said, I don't want to have to send out 18 subpoenas. That's going to be expensive for my client. I want him to produce these documents. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that is important.
It's always tricky, right? Because I think looking at the risk and the reward, I think, there is usually an upfront investment to those kinds of things. But like to your point, Laura, if we don't even know where to start looking,
Exactly.
it's very challenging. So at least if we can kind of give the attorneys some idea of where we might want to look. And the other thing to keep in mind, at least from what I have experienced, is that there are certain things that we can do kind of under the radar where you're not alerting, the other party,
Mm-hmm. Right.
around that. So that's been certainly, something for people to keep in mind. But each situation is different. You got to weigh out, the pros and cons. And again, that whole decision-making process that I talked about earlier, like, hey, what's the issue? What are the pros and cons of this? What information? I always tell people, let's get a quote. Let's figure out how much it's going to be, right? Because a lot of times people say, oh, it's expensive. Well, what does that mean, though? What are we talking, right? A lot of times, even if people are going to be doing asset searches or forensic accounting or whatever, business valuations, they can start with something that is kind of a preliminary. And then if we identify some red flags and things like that, then we can say, okay, now let's take it. So it's not like you have to go from 0 to 10,000 right out of the gate. We can take it in increments depending on what we see. And my job is to help my clients make good decisions around that, evaluating that, making sure we're pulling in the right people, to do some of those really highly specialized things. Not everybody's going to need that, but I do think if it makes sense, we need to at least explore it and get the information.
Right. And two, I always tell my clients, I'm going to work your case as hard as I can. I'm going to do what I can for you, and I'm going to get you hopefully what you want. But I'm not a magician. If I'm not given the information, I can't say, wait a minute, he has a bank account at Wells Fargo. I don't know that unless you can provide me that information or it's provided by the other side. I can't. A lot of times they'll say, well, you're an attorney. Can't you just call the bank? No, they don't talk to anybody else except that person, unless that. And I have had clients get on the phone and give me permission to talk to them, to the bank, because maybe there's a joint account and I'll be able to talk. But other than that, I can't. They don't, just because I'm an attorney. Are you kidding? If I call a bank, I'm an attorney, click. Okay, hello, they're going to hang up the phone on me. So they want to talk to the client. I guess Florencia has another question. She's got a lot going on. So let's see what Florencia has. Also, if the amount she's thinking, also, if the amount for child support is not enough, can I ask the court to do something about it? How long would it take? And I get people that, good question, Florencia. I get people that ask all the time, well, can I ask for more child support? Here in Florida, the mathematical equation and the number that pops out is the number that's paid. If you want more than that, you have to file a motion and you have to show extraordinary circumstances. Maybe there's a special needs child that needs more. Maybe there's something out of the ordinary that would require that. And even sometimes the payer will want to pay less. And so they have to show extraordinary circumstances. Why is it going to be less? Now, I have had where child support has been what we call de minimis. Maybe they're doing 50-50 time sharing and child support's $30. Like, really? Like, I'll ask the court to waive that, because it's like, that doesn't make any sense to pay $30 back. And, for somebody to pay $30 when they've got the children 50% of the time. So there's avenues to go down. There's certain hurdles you have to get over, saying, okay, what's the extraordinary circumstance? Why is there a need for more child support than what the calculations say? So there are some relief. Whether or not it happens, you just have to prove that and show that. So, and that makes me think, Rhonda, too, do you have clients that come back to you after the divorce and say, I can't, because you say you deal with a budget with them, that they come back and say, I just can't do it. I can't do it. It's too much for me. Do you ever have that happen? Like they can't meet the bills that they thought they could based on the child support or the alimony or whatever?
Not that much. And part of that is probably because, once the divorce is over, when we get them pointed in the right direction, at that point, then, I'm not going anywhere, but typically we get people in a really good spot. And if there are challenges around child support or alimony or things like that, they are reaching out directly, to the attorneys. I think, again, hopefully the work in doing the budget, getting, the property division, so there are some assets and cash and things that they can work to maybe supplement their budget if they need to, evaluating their options for maybe increasing income, going back to work if they need to, some of those kinds of things. For the most part, I think people do end up being okay, after the fact. But, that's not to say that there aren't issues. It's usually just that they're more on the legal side than they are really on the financial.
And if somebody says, Rhonda, you did such a great job for me with this financial stuff, can I keep you on like a per diem, like, hey, to review every year to see what I'm doing and if I'm doing it correctly or if there's something I should change? Is that something that you do as well?
Yeah, so there will be people that call that are on the other side of it that are just looking for some guidance and direction and accountability. And yeah, we certainly can help them. Got some great apps that we'll consider and suggest for them as well. But yeah, I mean, my main focus is helping women get through the divorce process, helping them with the positioning, finding the right people, making sure that we're helping them navigate through all of the process so that when the divorce is over, they're in as good of a place as they could be. They've got the knowledge and the experience to be financially confident so that as they start that next chapter, they're in a good spot.
Well, Rhonda, I mean, we're clicking. The hour always flies by, but with you, it's just totally been demolished. So we're almost to an hour. I want to make sure I keep it within the hour, but I want to thank you so much for coming. I want to tell everybody how I found Rhonda. I follow this two women that have this Dow Janes, it's called, and financial. They always give financial advice and they have YouTube. And then I saw this and I went, this is kind of interesting. And then I watched it and Rhonda just blew me away. So I was like, oh, I got to have Rhonda on mine, because she just blew me away with her knowledge. And I think her personality as well just seems real personable. And I would think that she makes people feel comfortable, the people that you deal with and your clients. So I wanted to have her on our forum so that everybody could meet her. And we have her website here that we've posted and her telephone number. It's toll free, right? So they can call.
It is.
Yeah, even though I don't think people do, I don't think there's long distance charges anymore. I'm not really sure, but I don't think there is. But anyway, that they can call and they can talk to you and set an appointment and do all of that to kind of help them through this. So I really want to thank you for being a part of our Facebook Live. And I look forward to following you and just getting information from you. I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much. On the website, people will be able to see the link to the podcast. There's also a quiz that they can take. What's your next best move? So a lot of times I don't know what to do next. You can take a quiz to determine what your next best move is. They can certainly reach out to me. So just thank you for the opportunity to be able to share. And I love talking about divorce because I know that people are really feeling like they're overwhelmed and maybe feeling alone. And if we can have just a small window of time with them where they leave feeling empowered and get a couple of their questions answered, we've done our job. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you and take care. And everybody, thank you so much for being a part of my Facebook Live. I look forward to seeing you next month. Please, if we didn't get to your question, I think we did. I think we got to everybody's questions. If we didn't, please know that I'm here. We're here for you. Please give us a call. We're here in Florida, in sunny Florida. I know some of you are getting kind of chilly up there. But anyway, have a great week and I'll see you next month.